what to do. All right. Hello, folks. This is Steve Vai. That's right. And I am doing this little interview here for my South American fans, and maybe for everybody, because the request is to talk all about me, all about my life, all about the early years, all about those things that I can't imagine anybody is really interested in, but I'm going to talk about them. All right? Okay. So I got this paper here that helped me out. Okay, my name is Stephen Ciro Vai. I was born in Long Island in New York. My parents were from America, and their parents were from Italy. All right, a little town. My father's mother and father were from a little town called Dorno in Italy, and my mother's parents were from Parma. So, pretty Italian here. But interesting, my grandfather, I went to Dorno, and I saw the little town that my grandmother and my grandfather grew up in. And what's so interesting is they lived about 10 minutes from each other, but they did not meet until they landed in Westbury, Long Island, which a bunch of people from that area migrated to. And so that's kind of interesting, one of those stories. And so they came to New York, and I was born on Long Island on June 6, 1960. Now, I was supposed to, this is the stuff that you're not going to hear. I'm only going to talk about it once. I was born on Long Island on June 6, 1960. I was supposed to be born on 4th of July, 1960, but I was born a month premature because I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, and I was suffocating. It's believed that I perhaps died before I was born. Is that possible? Anyway, so when I came into the world, I was blue. That's right. My mom told me that I was blue, and I came out and I was totally wrapped in this cord, and all she remembers was the doctors flipping me around like a pancake to get me untangled. And I guess I lived. And I had a really great childhood growing up in Long Island. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I have. My older brother is Roger, and then there's Pamela, my sister, and then my brother Mike, and then me, and then my sister Lil. And my sister Lillian and I, and we're all about 2 or 3 years in between each other, and we were really close. Well, the whole family was close. Whoops, sorry. My sister Lillian and I were very close. As a matter of fact, the whole family was very close, all of the siblings. And we were poor, not poor, but always seemed to have food and clothes. And I grew up in a great little neighborhood on Long Island. I had a lot of friends, everybody on the street, you know. We had a whole group of kids that lived on the street, and we did all those great things, play basketball. I was very good, too, actually, at baseball, football, Monopoly, all these games. So really great childhood growing up. And every street where I lived had tons of kids. And we were into the kind of the simple stuff that kids were into back in those days, you know. But in any event, let's get started here because it asks me about who am I? Spoke about that. I was born on 6/6/60, and on 6/6/66, I turned 6. And there are actually people that believe that I am the Antichrist because of that. Matter of fact, you know that movie, The Omen, when that came out, I actually thought I might have been an Antichrist. I was so scared. I was looking for tattoos of 666 on my head. I think my early musical influences, like many people, they start with what your parents are bringing home to listen to, or your brothers and sisters. And when I was very, very young, my parents listened to Italian polka music. That's right. And I don't know if I liked it very much, but it was music. But the one piece of music that they brought into the house that had a profound impact on me was the soundtrack to the movie West Side Story. This was incredible to me because I had seen the movie. I must have been 5 years old or something. But it had such an impact because the music was just so incredible. It had the movie had great story to it. The music had great messages in it and great stories in it. And the melodies were just historical. I just loved the melodies that Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim were writing for this West Side Story. And there was drama, and there was intensity, and there was rumbles and battles and all that stuff. So I really loved the way that the power of the orchestra and the way that sounded. So I remember when I was 6 years old, I was showing a lot of interest in music, I guess. And when I was 6, my mom had purchased for me a little spinet organ. And I remember I got that organ, and as soon as I got this thing, that was it. I mean, I lived with this thing. And it had a little, I remember I would hit a note, and I noticed that to the right, the notes go higher, and to the left, they go lower. And right at that point, I kind of understood music, you know? And I just kind of seen how I imagined how it worked. And Greg, is this making any noise on the microphone?
I think it's okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna take one off.
I got a good level coming from this shotgun as well.
Okay, well, I'm gonna take one of these off just in case. Thank you. So I got this little spinet organ, and I recognize that to the right the notes go higher, to the left they go lower. So it just kind of seemed to make sense to me when I would hear music, what it would look like. It kind of came together. It was, I remember it was an epiphany of sorts, because I sat there and I hit the note and I was like, okay, I get it. And I could even imagine, because there was music, and I understood intuitively what the notes were then, which was interesting because there wasn't much of anything else that I remember understanding very clearly when I was that age. So I remember two remarkable things happened at that moment. One of them was the recognition of music, and the other was the realization of the creative process of music. I mean, it sort of like an epiphany that came to me, and I realized that this is how you can write things, and this you can construct and manipulate. And it comes out sounding like music if you know what you're doing. And that was just so exciting to me, so interesting. And I just, even it's 6 years old, I think I just knew that's what I want to do. You don't think about the rest of your life when you're 6 years old, you know, but you do think of the present moment interest. And that was definitely a profound impact on me. Every little melody that I would hear, I would then just try to play, you know. And then because I was showing such an interest, like all good Italian boys that live on Long Island, I got an accordion when I was 9 years old. That's right, accordion. And it was great because I learned how to read music. I learned the bass clef, and I was able to play melodies. It was just nice to hear, you know, music coming out. I mean, it's a weird instrument, but I guess not too weird for a 9-year-old Italian. But it was all right. I did that on and off for about 3 years, but didn't really find great interest in it. And then in high school, I wanted to learn bass clef really well. So I took up the tuba. I played the tuba. But that wasn't until later. Okay, so now I'm still a young boy, 9 years old. But before that, I must have been about 7 years old, and I was at my school. And in the auditorium was a young boy, he was about 9, and he was playing a guitar. And this was another moment of clarity for me, because that was the first time I believe I saw somebody playing the guitar. And I knew it was the coolest thing I had seen, and it was another one of those awakening moments, you know, where I recognized something that had such an impact. It just looked so cool, you know, this kid, and he was like 9. But, you know, when you're 7 and somebody's 9 and they got a guitar, they're like a god. And I just was watching this kid. I could remember everything about the moment. The way the room smelled, what the kid was wearing. But just that guitar hanging off of him like that, it just looked so cool. It was just home. You know, it felt like, okay, that's it. I got it. Got it now. Thank you. And but I didn't play. I didn't know anybody. I couldn't get a guitar. I was 7, and I actually wasn't sure if I would ever play, because I perhaps was also suffering from feelings of low self-esteem or insecurity. I don't know, because I never felt worthy to play the guitar, because the guitar was so incredible to me. It was so beautiful. I almost didn't feel worthy to approach it. Imagine that. Isn't that weird? But I did eventually. And that was when I was 12. The first time my sister brought home Led Zeppelin. Yeah. As soon as I heard Led Zeppelin 2 and the song Heartbreaker and that solo, I mean, that was it. Now, you know, back then we didn't have internet or anything like that. It was all records. And I would listen to that record. There was Led Zeppelin 2, and I would just sit and play The Broom in the mirror. I used to make believe I was a big rock star. It was fantastic, jumping around from bed to bed and just going crazy and playing the music and just acting it out. I'm still a ham. I still do that. But back then it was a little more innocent and fun. Well, it's fun now too, of course. But there was a couple of records that came into the house. That was one of them. Woodstock, the musical for Woodstock. It was on 8-track, and the 8-track, it was stuck on one track, and it was the track, luckily for me, that had Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner and Sly and the Family Stone. And I just listened to it over and over and over. And this was before I started playing the guitar. I think when I was about 9, when I started with the accordion, that's when I started listening to this music that was coming into the house. Creedence Clearwater Revival, Sly and the Family Stone's greatest hits, top 40. I would save my lunch money and go up to Corvette's, which was a store up the street, department store, and they had a little record department. I'd buy 45s. What are they, Greg, 45s? Yeah, 45s, that's right. It's been a while. And I would just come home and listen to all that great 70s top 40. But I loved the feeling and the energy of rock, too. And I was still very interested in the compositional thing. As a matter of fact, the drive to compose never left me. And I would doodle and write notes constantly. I started writing songs as soon as I can, you know, just even when I didn't know what it meant, I just loved writing dots. Most kids have a tendency to draw stick figures or beautiful things that they can see in their mind. For me, it was just musical notes. I just really loved that. And that kind of went on as I was playing the accordion and listening to all this great music. Now, I would sneak into my sister's. What I'm going to tell you now, I believe, is at the crux. It's at the core of what I turned into in life, because I firmly believe that you become what you think about. And whatever vision you have of yourself in your mind, you morph into that. And I know that was the case with me, because when I would go into my sister's room when nobody was around and I put the headphones on and I'd listen to Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, I pictured myself in my mind's eye. I created a character, and that character was a performer, and it played guitar. Now remember, this was before I played guitar, but I was picturing it. I was creating a picture, and I saw myself playing just very elegantly, effortlessly, mellifluously, in a flow, connected, you know, and really lifting people up. And just moving very elegantly. And this was a visual that I just kept refining and refining. And I'm still doing that today. It's just that I've turned into that guy. But I still work to refine. So I was very fortunate, because on my street there was a lot of great kids, and I had a great group of kids that I hung out with, but there was this one kid in particular that lived 2 houses away. His name was John Sergio, and a very good friend of mine, older than me a little bit, so another kind of like, you know, God. But John had incredible taste in music, and if I was 10. Oh, he must have been 14 or something, 13. And I had come from the little environment of Led Zeppelin and the kind of things that, Sly and the Family Stone, Top 40. And I went to John's house once after I hadn't seen him for a while because I was listening to so much music and I kind of cut out of the social scene with my friends. He had somehow discovered, maybe through his brother, I believe, all of this incredible music that I had no idea existed. And John, first you go into his room and he had all the posters of all, I'm like, what do you got here, And he turned me on to the various kinds of magazines that were available at the time, like Raves and Circus, which had all rock stars in them. And he had all these posters, and he introduced me to like Jethro Tull. He was a huge Tull fan. And this music had incredible impact on me. And Queen. He turned me on to Queen. He brought me to my first Queen concert. And so many bands, ELP, Yes, progressive rock. So I really owe John such a debt of gratitude for, and it was just an innocent thing that kids do, you listen to music, but it had such an impact. But the thing that John did that really blew me away, he had a guitar. And he used to, and I didn't know that he even played it. So one day, there was the guitar there, and he picked it up and he started playing. And he played Aqualung, just the there, 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 there. And I was just so blown away. I just couldn't believe it, that there was somebody in my town that could play the guitar and play a Jethro Tull song, right? And I said, you must be the greatest guitar player in our town. And he said, well, if you think I'm good, you should see my teacher, Joe Satriani. That's right. John was taking lessons from Joe, who happened to live in our town. And I got his phone number. And I didn't have a guitar. I didn't have anything. I knew I wanted to play. So I had another friend that lived across town. His name was Richard Jankowski. And I would go to his house, and he had a guitar. And he had the guitar, and it was up on the wall of his bedroom. And it was this red Tesco Del Rey. Hey, Greg, can you grab that Tesco that I actually found one like it years later, but in blue. And I'll show you. But and I'd go, and my friend had this hanging in his room, and I would like go over his house just to see the guitar. It was so cool. It had this solid body, and mine had, I just found, mine had like 3 pickups and a whammy bar and all these switches and all this great stuff. God, this must weigh about a half a pound here. But I remember I said to my friend Rich once, I said, you have this guitar, why don't you play it? I mean, it's beautiful, And he said, wow, that thing, I'm not going to play it. I'll sell it to you for $5. And that was it. I couldn't believe it. And I ran home and I got the money and I got the guitar, and I just couldn't believe that I even owned this thing. For a while, I just sat and looked. I didn't even know how to put the strings on it or anything. But it gave a whole new meaning to my rock star posing in the mirror. And it was the most beautiful thing in the world. And it just didn't leave my side. I literally, you hear stories how I used to sleep with my guitar. No, I slept with my guitar every night. I took it into the bathroom with me. And so this was like an obsession. But it was interesting because I never told anybody that I played because, I don't know, I was maybe a little embarrassed because, as I always say, where I came from, if you played the guitar, either you were really cool or you thought you were really cool. And I was neither. So, and actually, right before that, right around when I got my guitar, I actually joined a band, but I didn't play the guitar. I played keyboards. And this was the first band I was in. And I couldn't really even play keyboards. I only knew a few chords, and that was for Jumping Jack Flash. And the name of the band was the Ohio Express, and it had Frank Strassel in it. And Frank was the guitar player. And Frank and I were really good friends. He was quite an interesting, lovely misfit. I loved him to death, but he played the guitar in the band. And eventually we both started to take lessons from Joe at the same time because I couldn't afford it otherwise. Lessons were $5. And we did a couple lessons like that, and then Joe came to me and said, you really have to take lessons by yourself. So I started doing that. But actually, that was the second band. The first band I was ever in, I started when I was 6 years old. And it consisted of me and my little sister Lillian. And I played the bongos, and she played the guitar. And she had an acoustic guitar, and it had one string on it. And we used to write all these songs. And the first song we wrote was called Hot Chocolate. That was the first song I ever wrote. It was called Hot Chocolate. And it goes like this. Hot chocolate, hot chocolate, makes you quiver, makes you quake. When you drink it straight. Hot chocolate. That should have been a hit. All right. That was the first song I wrote. And then I started a publishing company. Not really. Okay. And it was fun. At times I'm asked what was my favorite band that I was ever in. It was the band with my sister Lillian, my first band. There was no worries. There was nothing but joy. And we would just play and play and play all day, banging on things. Never had anything like that again. And then the second band was the one with Frank, where I played keyboards. And then when I started taking lessons from Joe, that became the most important thing in my life. My lessons were sacred. And Joe was, he was just cool. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. He had really long hair, and he was about 4 years older than me, and I was 12 when I started taking lessons, and he was about 15 or something, and when you're 12, somebody who's 15 is like a god, again, and especially if they could play. And Joe could play. He was never not good. He was always brilliant. He was always great, at least from my eyes. And he was strict. He was a tough teacher. He expected you to learn the lessons. And this was a vital part of my education, and the whole process of the way that I evolved musically was reflected in the discipline and the enjoyment and the joy and the discovery that I learned through my lessons with Joe. Not to mention my lifelong friendship with him. We're like this, and I couldn't be more happier. So my lessons with Joe, he was very sharing. He showed me everything. Now, I'll take you back. There was one thing that I forgot. It's kind of hard to stay chronological here. I really wanted to develop my musical understanding and my compositional skills. There was a class in my school that was a senior class for 12th graders, and it was a music theory class. And it was taught by this guy, Bill Westcott. And Bill was just one of these absolute brilliant savants, He was just one of these brilliant misfits, And Bill allowed me to start taking his music theory class in 7th grade. So I started in 7th grade. All the way through high school, I took this class, and it was intense. This is where I learned all music theory. I learned how to compose. I learned about classical music. I learned about harmony, time. But really, for 5 years, every day in school, my assignment was to come in with a piece of music. And not just like, a lead sheet. It had to be written music. And Bill was so brilliant. He would sight read everything I wrote. And that's really the greatest way to improve, is to hear what you're writing, to hear what it is that you're hearing in your head and what it actually turns out like on paper and to the ear. So Bill would read this stuff, and he would do all these incredible things, like he'd say, okay, well, this is what this song sounds like in the Ionian scale, So he would play it backwards. He'd read it and play it backwards. And then he would play it upside down in inversion. So I would be able, and then he'd play it in different time signatures, in different keys, you know. So it was an amazing educational opportunity. And I wrote ferociously. It was one of my favorite things to do. And I remember I wrote my first orchestra score in high school for the high school orchestra. It was called Sweet Wind from Orange County. It was an abysmal disaster, but I did it. But one of the things I wasn't doing was taking all of this theory and applying it to the guitar. I actually didn't make that connection. You know, I was like playing Whole Lotta Love or something. But that was one of the great things about taking lessons with Joe, because he was taking classes with Bill also. And Joe, during my lessons, would show me how to incorporate a lot of this music theory onto the guitar. And what was really great was my lessons with Joe, probably about 3 or 4 years I took lessons. I think he moved to Japan, and then he moved to San Francisco. But, and I was taking lessons from all sorts of other teachers. Also, I had one guy's name was Joe Bell. He was more jazz. He taught me more jazz. And Tom Sharkey was another teacher of mine who was a good friend of Joe's. And, but it was really great, that whole era, because I had gone from that little band with Frank Stroessel, Ohio Express, into an actual real band where I was playing the guitar. And that was called Circus. And I was invited into the band none other than by my good friend John Sergio again. So John was pivotal in all of this stuff. So I joined Circus. I was 13. I was only playing for about 6 or 9 months before our first gig. And our first gig was at the high school gym, where they would have these dances. So I remember the first gig that I ever did. I actually have photos. They're posted on the website. I was so nervous. Like, it started about 4 days before the show. I was so nervous that I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. And I just remember thinking that I'm going to be a roomer in my own room. I'm not going to be a professional musician, because this sucks. I don't like the way I feel. I'm too nervous. There wasn't anything exciting about it. I just wanted it to be over. And but something very interesting happened right before the gig, right as I'm walking onto the stage. Now, this is a show in my high school, in the gym, where everybody is my friends and people I go to school with, and they're there watching me. So I was so nervous. But interestingly enough, the moment I got on the stage and I started to play, everything changed. And I felt like I was home. I just felt, I can't explain, it was just very comfortable. And I was relieved. And I really enjoyed it. And something very funny happened. I started to, of course, I started throwing shapes and hamming it up. And I did this one thing. I was doing the Star Spangled Banner, that's right, with my teeth. And I had this Univox Les Paul. Hey, Greg, can you grab the Univox Les Paul that I got? This isn't the one that I owned at the time, but it was. But I bought another one just like it, just to have it, just like I bought the Tesco. So my first guitar was the Tesco Del Rey, because it had a whammy bar. The next one was this imitation Les Paul, because Jimmy Page played a Les Paul, so that's what I wanted. But this is Univox Les Paul. And this is similar to the one that I had. And I couldn't believe that I owned it. Even looking at this one now, I'm just so, it brings you back, you know, to the charm, you know, just the feeling of being young and playing a guitar, you know, and just having the notes come out. And even though it sounded like crap, you know, it was me doing it. So everything about the instrument takes on another whole dimension, just even the color, and just the way it looked. They're so beautiful, and it was kind of precious, that'd be a word that I would use. It was just sacred, And I still feel that way about guitars. There's something just very sacred about them. And thanks. So there I was, and I had on my Univox Les Paul, and I'm playing the Star Spangled Banner with my teeth, and my strap breaks. And as I go down, my knee lands on the wah-wah, so it gets into the high treble position, and my head lands with my ear right perpendicular with the speaker, which was feeding back a very, very, very high-pitched sound because of the wah-wah, and it was such a sharp tone in my ear that my eyes went crossed and I basically fainted. So there I am being the big rock star. And all of a sudden, boop, up, whee, down. So that's my first gig. Anyway, I got up and still knew that this was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So then the lessons with Joe got real wonderful and really deep. And there was one experience that I had with Joe that was pretty profound in shaping the rest of my career, the rest of the way I looked at the world. So when I was young, a child growing up, I felt inferior. I didn't think I was a very intelligent person. And one would probably believe that if you saw how bad I was at academics in school. I was very average, if not under average, with anything that had to do with academics. I loved math, but things like history, I still don't understand why anybody studies it. So that was a little rough then, especially with things like English or writing and stuff. I just wasn't very good. It just didn't. Music was very clear. Music and math, But I didn't have a lot of confidence in my ability to do mental tasks, memorization of things, that kind of stuff. I convinced myself, and this is not uncommon that people do, I convinced myself that I was incapable of it. I remember one of my first few lessons with Joe. I went in and he said, memorize every note on the guitar. So I said, okay, And in my mind, I'm saying, I'm going to memorize every note. I can't. I'm too stupid. I can't retain it. I don't want to bother with it. And so many of the theory things, I just didn't feel like I was. It was interesting to me that all of the music theory I was learning came so fast and so easy. And once I heard it once, it just made sense. And I never forgot it to this day. It was like somebody telling me a secret that I always knew. But certain things, there was a brick wall. And one of them was, at that moment, learning the notes on the guitar, because it required something different. It was like a tactile memorization. So I went home that week and I came back and I sit down to do my lesson with Joe, and he says, play me a G sharp on the B string. And I just went, and he goes, stop, go home. He kicked me out. And he said, don't come back until you learn the notes. And he took my money too. So, and he was right. And as I'm leaving, his mom says, how was the lesson? And Joe said, my star student is losing his brain. So this had an intense impact on me. First of all, he said two things. First, I was his star student, which when you're 12, that means a lot, because he had a lot of students. And we all looked up to Joe. I mean, he was just cool, and great. So, and then he said, is losing his brain. That was the second thing. And I remember I walked home, and that walk home from Joe's house to my house was the most important walk I've ever taken, because in it, I came to the firm conclusion within myself that I was never going to allow myself to not do something that I believe I can do. I'm going to go home and I'm going to memorize every note flawlessly. Everything that he gives me, I'm going to just memorize it like it's second nature. Because you know what? I'm not stupid. And I guess these are the things that go on in the mind of at least in the mind of this 12-year-old. And that was really profound, because I had convinced myself, I aligned with a moving forward plan of confidence. And that was all I needed. There wasn't any, there was no time after that I felt insecure about my own abilities for those things that I put my mind to. So that thank you for that, Joe, for kicking my ass, because that was a good one. And so that whole period then in high school, taking lessons and playing out with the band Circus was fantastic. But then I was out of the band Circus, and I joined, I was probably 15 or 16, I joined Rage. Now, Circus was the band that did kind of like progressive rock. We did things like, I don't know, I can't even remember, Nectar and things like that. It was kind of like progressive. And some, little Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. But Rage was the band with all the greasers, all right? These were my buddies from the other side of the street. These were the tough guys. These guys, I can't even believe, this was more rowdy of a group and more confrontational and troublemaking than any band I was ever in after that. Rage. Barry Calavagna on vocals, Rob Neese on bass, Dave Giacone on drums. What a great time. Oh my God. And all of our friends were just beautiful derelicts. So this is now we started playing all the good stuff. Kiss, Led Zeppelin, David Bowie, Aerosmith, Hendrix, Born to Be Wild, And we used to play the clubs on Long Island with all the other kinds of bands that were playing, like Twisted Sister. But we they were big. We were just kids, really, And but wherever we played, there was always like a riot, because my friends would come and just destroy the place whenever we would play. I've actually ended up down at the precinct on certain situations because of the antics. They would destroy places while we were jamming. It was really great. But all through this period, I was also still cultivating my interest in compositional music. And I was writing, I was composing through all this, and I knew that I wanted to continue that. And it was during that period then, when I was about 15 or 16, that I discovered Frank Zappa, the music of Frank Zappa, which had a profound impact on me, because Frank was doing all of it, it seemed, all the things that I liked. He was composing, he was playing wild guitar, there was vocals, there was comedy, there was drama, there was all this great stuff in Frank's music, just beautiful melody. And I knew that that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be somebody that can play the guitar and compose. I don't know why, but that was it. I loved it. I loved doing it. I used to have these practice regimes. And my practice regimes, some of them are I have them all written down from when I was young, but I wrote a couple of books. One of them was a 10-hour workout. Another was a 30-hour workout. The 30-hour workout was meant as a cycle, usually 3 days. But I know that for me back then, 9 hours of practice in a day, I'd feel okay. And sometimes more and sometimes less. I remember I had a paper route, had to save up to buy a guitar. So I was very anal about my practice schedule, and I had it all broken down, and I had goals. And it was so great. When I was young, sitting in my bedroom practicing and learning these songs and playing with the bands I was in and taking my lessons, that was the greatest. There was just something so amazing about playing the guitar, about being young like that and playing rock guitar. Just the sound of it, the way it made you feel, the bands I was listening to, the comfort, the coolness, the enjoyment of all of that, and to be a part of it. That was it. I had no expectations for the future. You don't think about those things then. You don't even think about, do I have to do this my whole life? Do I have to be great? There was none of that. There was no concerns. There was only the fascination with getting better and better and better. That was it. I would imagine things that I couldn't do, or I'd take my lesson, and I loved working on something I couldn't do, and then all of a sudden you can do it. It's like magic, And I discovered something very important back then, and that's that if you don't give up, you can't lose. How could you lose if you don't quit, And it was fantastic because I proved that point to myself constantly, because I would do it all the time. I'd find things that I couldn't do, and then I work on them until I could do them. And this gives you a great sense of confidence and dignity. And from where I was coming, being in a place that maybe I wasn't so friendly to myself, to being like, yeah, okay, you can do this, That was incredibly supportive and inspiring. But it was just the coolness of the music, that feel. Even today when I listen to some of that stuff I used to listen to back then, and most people know what it means to hear music from your past. You have like a nostalgic reaction, and it's really nice. So I wanted to expand my compositional abilities, so I decided to attend Berklee College of Music in Boston. And it was interesting because this was another incredible experience, When I had gotten there, I pretty much knew all I needed to know about music theory from Bill, but there was other classes that were very interesting to me, such as writing for percussion and some of the harmony and the solfege classes. They were fantastic. But the thing that I loved most about Berklee was just being there with all the other students. This is an incredible environment. And I think that going to college has a lot of specialities in it. You are leaving home for the first time, perhaps. This is not uncommon. You're feeling your independence. You're following your dreams. You're at that age of 17 or 18 or 19, which is just like your eyes are opening. And I get to Boston, which is this amazing city. It's so beautiful. And this was 1978 or something like that. And I remember meeting all these people, and they all had the same dreams and hopes and wishes as me, And they played all these different instruments and had all these interests. It was fantastic. But the thing that was probably of the greatest value to me at Berklee, besides obviously the people I met, which many are still my dear friends to today, like Dave Rosenthal, for instance, Stu Ham. We all met at college and just are still friends today, and we record together. We had a band. When I got there, Dave Rosenthal was one of the first guys I met, and he introduced me to Pia, who is my wife today, 42 years later. And we were in a band. We started a band. And the first band I was in with him, I think, was called Axis. And that had Stu Ham on bass. And I was about 18, And then we started another band called Morning Thunder. And that had Randy Coven on bass and Eddie Rogers on drums. And we had so much fun because we'd write all this impossible music, and just play it and rehearse all the time. And so Berklee was a fantastic experience. And while I was at Berklee, I was very heavy into Frank's music. And I actually, before I went to Berklee, I got Frank's phone number from a friend of mine that stole a little Rolodex from a studio in New York City. And it had all these rock stars' phone numbers. And I was sitting in my room playing, practicing, and he's telling me all the people that he has on this thing. And he's like Mick Jagger. I'm like, oh, Mick Jagger's phone number, wow, And he's going through all this list, and then he gets to the Z's, and he goes, oh, and I have Frank Zappa's phone number. I'm like, so I actually took that number and I tried calling Frank. I was 16, and oddly enough, knowing Frank and Gail today, I'm so surprised at what happened, because the phone rang and Gail answered it, and I just said, I'm a fan. I got your phone number. I don't want to intrude, but I'd love to talk to Frank if there was a possibility. And she was so nice. And she said, well, Frank's on tour, but you can call back in 6 months. Which, knowing Gail, I can't imagine her saying that to anybody. So I waited 6 months and I called back. She goes, well, he's out on tour again. Call back in another. So I did this until one day I was at my friend's Eddie Rogers' apartment in Boston when I was 18, going to school at Berklee, and I called Frank and he answered the phone. It was a shocker. First of all, for all those years, I didn't even think it was his real phone number. So my in was that Frank was a fan of Edgar Varese, and the Boston Public Library had some Edgar Varese scores. So I Xeroxed the scores, and I was just telling Frank, I'm a big fan. I have these scores I'd like to send you. And he was really nice. I caught him in a good mood, thank God. And he allowed me to send it. He gave me his home address, and I asked him if I could send him a cassette of my band and of me playing. Also, I sent him a transcription of a song that he had composed called The Black Page, which is this incredibly dense, complex, yet profoundly beautiful piece of music. And I had transcribed it, and the transcription was very, very close. It was accurate enough to where Frank took an interest in me. So while I was at Berklee, he sent me this package, and it had in it this huge score for this piece of music that he wrote called Voile. And he changed the name of that to Mo and Herb's Vacation. And it was this big, beautiful score. And he also sent me the sheet music for The Black Page with a note that said, make me a cassette playing this as fast as you can. Now, The Black Page is a slow piece of music. The tempo is slow, but the notes are really fast. And it's very dense. And I did this, and it was so weird because after that I had sent this cassette of The Black Page, there was an interview that Frank did in a little magazine in San Francisco. And he started talking about me in the magazine. And now, up to that point, I had never even seen my name in print, so that was a shocker. And then I called him, and he asked me if I wanted to try out for the band, and I told him I was 18, and he said, forget it. So he put me on salary, though, transcribing guitar solos. I had met him in New York City, and he had given me these cassettes of all these improvised guitar solos and drum parts with Vinnie Colaiuta. So I transcribed both of that stuff, and I moved out to California a couple of days after my 20th birthday, and I started going right up to the house right away, and Frank then put me on salary to do these transcriptions. And my job was to go through his entire catalog, because back in the day, in order to copyright your music, you had to have a lead sheet sent to Washington for the registration. So a lot of Frank's music didn't have lead sheets, and it didn't have written music, some of it, you know, a lot of it. And the stuff that was very orchestral, you know. So one of my jobs was to go through his entire catalog and make lead sheets for every song. And sometimes I got real deep into it, like for a record like Roxy and Elsewhere, I transcribed the entire record, every note, and which was fantastic. I loved doing that. And Frank released a book called the Frank Zappa Guitar Book, Guitar Song Book, and it's these transcriptions that I've done. A couple of I think one or two other guys did one or two transcriptions in it, but the bulk of it's my transcriptions, and it's a very dense, complex book. But I was there at Berkeley when all that started to happen, and then when I moved out to California, I was doing the transcribing for Frank. And you go up to the house. I'd go up to the house, and when you go up to the house, Frank's house back then, you're there for like a day or sometimes 9 days, you know, because you just start doing stuff. He just pulls you in, you know. It's constantly creative, constantly doing something. So I remember when Frank started pulling me into the studio to record, and I was just constantly recording, transcribing, and then finally he was putting a band together for his 1980 American tour, and he invited me to the audition, and he gave me a bunch of songs to learn, and of course I get there, and none of the songs that he gave me to learn were the ones that he called out to play. But somehow I got through it, and my time with Frank after that was probably an additional 3 years, and I had toured, did the 80 American tour, the 81 American tour, and European tour in 82. And it was fantastic. It was tough for other reasons than what you might assume. It was another period in my life where I was going through great changes. This was my early 20s. And I've talked a lot about that in the past. Because all that I'm talking in regard to my music career, there's only one dimension of what, like everybody, there's so many different things going on in your life. And one of the perhaps the most important focus or interest of mine was of the esoteric nature. You know, I was one of these people that wanted to know what's going on. What is going on in the what? Why are we here? You know, this kind of thing. But really, there was a period there in my early 20s that were just mentally difficult. I went through a difficult period, but it helped me to find some spiritual balance or an interest in spirituality. And that became one of my main focuses back then. And that was very helpful in pulling me out of a very confused, depressed frame of mind. And the rebound was lovely, because what happened was I had moved out of Hollywood and purchased this house. I had saved up all my money with Frank to put a down payment on this little house, and I got all my friends to live there to pay the rent. So all I had to do was play the guitar all day, and there was a shed out back that I converted into this little studio, stucco blue studio, and I loved doing that too. And the idea that recording was so interesting to me. That was another great interest, was engineering and recording, and just kind of Frank taught me how to edit tape, and when that happened, that was it. I just recorded everything I could, and I just edited, and nothing was safe. You know, I just kept splicing and editing, and my whole room was filled with little pieces of tape. So then I actually thought I could record music, I could record like songs, and I could record a record. And I just started going crazy recording. And the music was very influenced by Frank, because that's what I knew at the time, and that was the kind of thing I enjoyed. And the interesting thing was I paid very little time to quality. I did put not very much attention on the quality of the recordings. And I remember I had recorded all this music, and I listened back, and this is what turned into Flexible. And I listened back, and I hated it. It just sounded terrible. You know, it didn't sound like how good Frank's music sounded, and it was because I wasn't paying real attention. So I re-recorded everything, and I became very forensic and focused on timing, on tones, quality, EQ, all these things, and I made Flexible. And the interesting thing about that record was that I released it on my own. I actually made my own little label, and I found distribution. And then shortly after that, there was all these great guitar players, that rock guitar players that hit the scene, like Edward Van Halen and Yngwie Malmsteen. And was out of Frank's band, and I was into the Stucco Blue studio in Sylmar, recording. And when I heard all these great guitar players, it re-sparked my interest in really improving on the guitar in a rock fashion. You know, with Frank, it was more notes and, you know, kind of compositional stuff, but I wanted to get back to my rock roots. So I joined this band that Yngwie was in, that he quit, called Alcatraz, and that was great. We made a record called Disturbing the Peace, and it brought a lot of attention to me in a sense, because Yngwie was such a big player at the time, you know, very popular. And then at that time, after we had released and toured on the first record, the news was that David Lee Roth was leaving Van Halen. And interestingly enough, the moment I heard that news, I kind of felt like that was my gig. And not any pretentious reason, it was just one of these feelings of, that's mine. And sure enough, a week later, I get the call from Dave. And this was a stunner, because I was kind of famous overnight. But there was a couple of other things that happened before that. One of them was, if I was to go back and kind of pinpoint the pivotal moments in my career, I would say the first one was when I got the little organ and I recognized what music was. The second one was when I got my first guitar and I realized I could play. And the third one was that walk home from my lesson with Joe, where my confidence became bulletproof. And the next one after that was when I had received the scores and stuff in the mail from Frank, and I sent him my version of the Black Page on the guitar. So having the cachet of being a Zappa musician is quite powerful, I discovered later, because Frank's musicians, Zappa musicians, are known to be extraordinary at something. And usually it's something that Frank discovers in you. At least he did for me. But the next very powerful move after that was the making of my record Flexible, and in particular the Attitude song. Flexible was a record that had a lot of compositional kinds of things on it, very quirky, and it had a couple of pieces that were my guitar showcases. And I remember the Attitude song, it used to be called The Night Before, because when I recorded it, I had heard that Alice Cooper was looking for a guitar player and accepting demo tapes the next day. So I wrote the Attitude song entirely in one night. That's why it was called The Night Before. And it was an improvised bass part in one take. And then I just built the guitars around it. And I knew the kind of thing I wanted to do, because I had all these wild ideas, and I knew some of them were innovative, although I didn't realize what that meant. I just knew I hadn't really heard certain things before. And it was fun. I mean, that's really the one and only good reason to do anything, you know? It's just so enjoyable. So then I had the Attitude song, and it was showcased. This was one of the big things that happened for me in my career, was when Guitar Player magazine put the floppy disk of the Attitude song in the magazine because it reached a lot of people, and it had some really crazy guitar playing for that time. So it was very well received, and that boosted it up. And then the Crossroads gig. Crossroads was a film I was in. I played the devil's guitar player named Jack Butler. And that came about when Ry Cooder called Guitar Player and said, I needed the new hotshot guitar player. And they played him the Attitude song over the phone, and he said, okay, that's the guy. And when Ry approached me to do it, he gave me a script. And I read the script and I said, yeah, I can do this. So we went into the studio and we recorded the duel. It was really cool. And then the director, Walter Hill, asked me if I wanted to be in the film playing this Jack Butler guy. And at first I thought, I don't want to be an actor. I like being, a musician. But he asked me again, and I said, okay. I read the script, and I said, okay, I'm not an actor, but I'll give it a shot. I knew I could play the part of a very dark character. I had those tendencies at the time. And you got Crossroads. And I have to tell you, in my entire career, I've noticed that a hit record can reach a lot of people. But a hit movie, oof, like that. I mean, to this day, people come up to me and say, well, aren't you Jack Butler? Say, no, I'd hate to be Tom Cruise. How do you have a life? Anyway, so Crossroads was quite powerful. And that led to the gig with Dave Roth, because he heard that and he saw that. And that actually then led to the gig with Whitesnake, because David Coverdale saw Crossroads and said, okay, that's the guy. So these were all bullet points that happened in my career that fostered it along. But I think the clincher came when I recorded Passion and Warfare, because that was a very adult record. I mean, that was matured. I had matured musically. I had been through all that stuff. I had had all those experiences. I had toured with rock stars. I had sold millions of records with rock bands. But in the back of my mind through it all, there was still that music that was there, that wanted to come out, that hadn't really found the venue for it yet. I was loving all the stuff I was doing with the rock bands, but still, there was something there that was saying, but it's not you. And if you don't be you, you will be very unhappy. So I made Passion and Warfare, and I became me. And that's pretty much was the kickoff of my solo career. And this is a lot of talking about me. I'm never going to do it again. I'm done telling these stories. But there may be some people interested. This doesn't even scratch the surface of some of the more deeper things that I was going through in my life that may or may not be interesting. But I will say this: if you're out there and you're a music fan, or you're just you have aspirations to play an instrument, I could just tell you this: one of the healthiest ways to go into playing an instrument, and this is just my perspective, is with no expectations, no demands on yourself that you have to be great, that you have to be better than anybody, that you have to fit in. You do not need to fit in. On the contrary, the more that you don't fit in, the better we are, because that's diversity, and that's what we need. So if you have a desire to play an instrument, it's so important for you to know that you're worthy of that. And if you can do away with any preconceived ideas that you have to be loved by everybody and accepted and successful and all these things, but instead give your full attention to the enjoyment of playing the instrument, the rest will take care of itself beautifully without you worrying about it. And so the moral of this story is, if you find your enthusiasm, I'll call that your bliss, and follow it, that's what you're here for. That's actually what you're here for. You're here to enjoy that. You're here to experience your own unique creative impulses. You need to give no excuses for anything. And the payoff is the freedom of being creative on your own terms. Nothing will substitute for this, and nothing will be good enough for you except your own enjoyment of your creative impulses. So there's Steve Vai's story, or a little piece of it in a nutshell. I hope that you've enjoyed some of it, or all of it, and I wish you all the best and sincere thanks. Thank you.